No one expected it to end like this. For weeks, the mystery surrounding Nancy Gray's disappearance had the entire country on edge. News channels were running non-stop coverage. Social media was exploding with theories, and every new clue only made the story darker. But everything changed the moment the FBI walked into that interrogation room. Because the man sitting across the table wasn't just anyone. He was Nancy Gray's own son-in-law. At first, he looked calm. Too calm. Cameras captured him walking into the building with a blank expression, refusing to answer a single question from reporters shouting his name. But according to leaked reports from inside the investigation, that calm facade didn't last long. Sources claim that when federal investigators presented one particular piece of evidence, the entire atmosphere in the room shifted. His hands started shaking. His voice cracked. And then something happened that no one saw coming. The man who had spent days denying everything suddenly broke down under pressure. What did the FBI show him? What was hidden in those files that made him collapse in seconds? And the biggest question of all, was this the moment the truth about Nancy Gray finally began to unravel? Because if the leaked reports are true, this story is about to take a turn no one is prepared for. To understand why that interrogation room moment shocked everyone, you have to go back to the beginning, back to the life of Nancy Gray. For decades, Nancy Gray was known as one of the most respected and influential figures in her community. Friends describe her as calm, intelligent, and fiercely private. She wasn't the kind of person who lived in the spotlight, yet somehow her life always seemed to attract attention. Nancy had built a reputation that most people could only dream of. She was involved in local charities, community projects, and several business ventures that quietly made her a powerful name behind the scenes. But behind that carefully maintained image, insiders say the Gray family wasn't as peaceful as appeared. In fact, several people close to the family now claim that tensions have been building for years. And at the center of those tensions was Nancy's son-in-law, the man now sitting in that FBI interrogation room. His name had rarely appeared in headlines before this. To the outside world, he seemed like the perfect addition to the Gray family. Successful, confident, and always standing beside Nancy's daughter at public events. Photos from family gatherings showed smiling faces, warm embraces, and what looked like the picture-perfect life. But according to people who claim they were close to the family, the reality behind those smiles may have been very different. Several sources now say the relationship between Nancy and her son-in-law had quietly deteriorated over the past few years. At first, the disagreements were small. Financial decisions, business disagreements, different opinions about family matters. But insiders say those disagreements slowly turned into something much more serious. Neighbors reported hearing heated arguments during visits. Friends of family claimed that Nancy had become increasingly cautious around certain members of her inner circle. One person who asked to remain anonymous told reporters something chilling. They said Nancy had once mentioned that she felt pressured by someone close to her. At the time, no one paid much attention to the comment. Now, investigators are reportedly looking at it very differently. Because everything changed the night Nancy Gray disappeared. It was a quiet evening. Nothing unusual. No warning signs. At least, that's what everyone believed at first. Security cameras around the neighborhood showed almost no movement. Her house lights turned off at the usual time. Her phone activity stopped shortly after midnight. But the next morning, something was terribly wrong. Nancy was gone. Her car was still in the driveway. Her purse and personal belongings were untouched inside the house. And there were no signs of forced entry. That discovery immediately raised a disturbing question. If no one broke in, then how did she disappear? Within hours, local authorities launched a search operation. Police officers began interviewing neighbors, checking surveillance footage, and tried to piece together the last known moments before Nancy vanished. At first, investigators believed it might be a kidnapping. But as the hours turned into days, the situation became far more complicated. Because the evidence they were finding didn't point to strangers. Instead, according to early investigative reports, the clues seemed to lead closer to home. Much closer. That's when federal investigators stepped in. And the moment the FBI joined the case, the entire tone of the investigation changed. Agents began reviewing financial records, phone calls, and private communications within Nancy's inner circle. One name reportedly appeared again and again during that process: her son-in-law. At first, officials insisted this didn't mean he was a suspect. They described him as someone they simply wanted to speak with. But sources close to the investigation now say the questions became more intense with every passing day. And then, earlier this week, something happened that shocked even seasoned investigators. According to multiple leaked reports, the FBI uncovered a piece of evidence that completely shifted the direction of the case. Within hours of that discovery, Nancy Gray's son-in-law was asked to come in for questioning. What was supposed to be a routine conversation quickly turned into something far more serious. Reporters outside the federal building noticed a change immediately. Agents were moving faster. Phones were ringing nonstop, and the atmosphere inside the building had suddenly become tense. Then came the moment no one expected. The interrogation began. And according to sources inside the room, it didn't take long before the calm, confident man sitting at the table started to lose control. Because the investigators were about to show him something he clearly wasn't prepared for. Something that might finally explain what really happened the night Nancy Gray disappeared. But what that evidence was, and why it made him collapse under pressure, is where this story takes its first truly shocking turn. To understand why the FBI interrogation room suddenly turned into a pressure cooker, you have to understand who Nancy Gray really was. Because Nancy Gray wasn't just another missing person. She was powerful, quietly powerful. For more than 3 decades, Nancy had built a reputation that most people in her city could only dream of. Business owners respected her. Charity boards relied on her. Local politicians often sought her advice behind closed doors. On the surface, she lived the kind of life people admired. A beautiful estate on the outskirts of the city, a carefully managed public image, and a family that always appeared perfectly united whenever cameras were around. But according to several insiders who have recently spoken out, the story behind the Gray family was far more complicated than anyone realized. Because behind the polished photos and carefully planned appearances, something inside the family had been quietly breaking apart. And if the leaked reports are to be believed, the cracks had been forming for years. At the center of those growing tensions was one person who had once been welcomed into the family with open arms: Nancy Gray's son-in-law. To the outside world, he looked like the perfect match for Nancy's daughter. Confident, successful, ambitious, the kind of man who seemed comfortable standing beside a powerful family name. But people who claim they were close to the situation now say the relationship between Nancy and her son-in-law was far from perfect. In fact, some say it was slowly turning into something much darker. At first, the disagreements were subtle. Small arguments about financial decisions. Discussions about investments that became unexpectedly heated. Private family meetings that reportedly ended with raised voices. Most of these incidents never reached the public. The Gray family had always been extremely careful about protecting their reputation. But whispers started spreading among people who knew them personally. Neighbors reported tension during family gatherings. Business associates noticed that Nancy had begun keeping certain financial matters completely private, even from some members of her own family. One former associate, who asked not to be identified, recently made a statement that has raised serious questions. They claim Nancy once confided that she felt pressured by someone very close to her. At the time, the comments sounded vague, maybe even meaningless. But now investigators are reportedly re-examining that statement very carefully, because everything changed the night Nancy Gray disappeared. It was supposed to be an ordinary evening. No dramatic events. No warning signs. At least, that's what the initial report suggested. Security cameras in the neighborhood captured almost nothing unusual. Nancy's house lights switched off around the same time they always did. Her phone activity stopped shortly after midnight. Everything looked routine, until the next morning. That's when the first alarm was raised. Nancy wasn't answering calls. Her staff couldn't reach her. And when a family member finally arrived at the house to check on her, they discovered something that immediately triggered panic. Nancy was gone. But what investigators found inside the house made the situation even more confusing. Her car was still parked outside. Her purse and personal belongings were sitting exactly where she had left them. There were no signs of a break-in, no broken windows, no forced doors, no evidence that anyone had violently entered the property. For experienced investigators, that detail raised a chilling possibility. If no one forced their way inside, then Nancy may have known the person who came to see her that night. Within hours, local authorities launched a massive search operation. Police began knocking on doors across the neighborhood. Surveillance footage from nearby homes was collected. Friends, family members, and business associates were questioned. At first, the investigation focused on the possibility of an abduction. But as more evidence was analyzed, the direction of the case reportedly started shifting, because the clues investigators were uncovering didn't point toward a random criminal. Instead, according to several leaked reports, the evidence seemed to be circling closer and closer to Nancy's own inner circle. That's when federal authorities stepped in. The moment the FBI joined the investigation, everything changed. Financial records were suddenly being reviewed. Private communications were examined. Phone logs and digital activity were carefully analyzed. And according to sources familiar with the investigation, one name kept appearing again and again during that process: Nancy Gray's son-in-law. At first, investigators insisted he wasn't a suspect. They described him as someone they simply wanted to speak with. But the tone of those conversations reportedly became more intense with every passing day. Then came the moment that shocked even seasoned reporters. Earlier this week, multiple investigative sources claimed that the FBI uncovered a piece of evidence so significant that it forced agents to immediately bring Nancy's son-in-law in for questioning. What was supposed to be a routine interview quickly turned into something far more serious. Reporters outside the federal building noticed the tension immediately. Agents were moving quickly through the hallways. Phones were ringing nonstop. And inside the interrogation room, the atmosphere was reportedly becoming unbearable because investigators were about to present something that could change the entire story. Something that, according to leaked reports, caused Nancy Gray's son-in-law to finally crack under pressure. And if those reports are accurate, the truth behind Nancy Gray's disappearance may be far more disturbing than anyone imagined. But what the FBI showed him in that room is where the story takes its first truly explosive turn. The moment the door to that interrogation room closed, everything changed. Inside the federal building, the atmosphere had become tense enough to make even experienced investigators uneasy. A single overhead light illuminated the table where Nancy Gray's son-in-law sat, his posture stiff, his expression controlled. But just barely. Across from him sat two FBI agents. One of them quietly slid a thin folder across the table. At first, the room was silent. For several seconds, no one spoke. According to sources who later described the moment, the man initially tried to maintain the same calm demeanor he had shown when walking into the building earlier that day. He leaned back in his chair, folded his hands together, and reportedly said only a few words. "I've already told the police everything I know." But the investigators didn't respond immediately. Instead, the agent slowly opened the folder and turned it toward him. And that's when things started to fall apart. Inside the folder were printed messages, private conversations investigators had recovered during their digital investigation, text messages, encrypted chats, fragments of conversations that, until that moment, had never been seen outside a very small circle of people. Witnesses later said his reaction was instant. His eyes widened, his breathing changed, and for the first time since the questioning began, the confidence in his voice disappeared. Because one of those messages contained a sentence investigators were now calling a critical turning point. The message read, "Tonight might finally solve the problem." No explanation, no context, just that single line. Investigators asked him who he was referring to. At first, he laughed nervously. He claimed the message had been misunderstood. According to him, it had nothing to do with Nancy. But the agents weren't finished, because that message wasn't the only thing inside the folder. They flipped to the next page, and what appeared there made the room go silent again. A timestamp, 2:14 a.m. The exact time investigators believe something unusual happened at Nancy Gray's property. Until that moment, Nancy's son-in-law had insisted he was home all night. But according to the data the FBI had collected, his phone had briefly connected to a cellular tower less than 2 miles from Nancy's house that same night. When the investigators pointed this out, sources say his composure began slipping. His fingers started tapping the table. His voice grew louder. And for the first time, he reportedly raised his voice at the agents. "This is ridiculous," he said. "You're twisting things." But the pressure was only beginning, because while this interrogation was unfolding inside the building, something else was happening outside. The story was starting to explode online. Earlier that afternoon, an anonymous account posted what appeared to be screenshots of private messages connected to the investigation. Within minutes, the post began spreading across social media. One message quickly went viral. At City Watcher, "If these leaked texts are real, this case just took a terrifying turn. Something is very wrong here." Another user wrote, at True Crime Forum, "Look at the timestamp on that message. That's the same night Nancy disappeared. This can't be a coincidence." News reporters began picking up the story almost immediately. By evening, the hashtag Nancy Gray Mystery was trending across multiple platforms. Inside the interrogation room, agents were already aware that the situation outside was spiraling, and they decided to push even harder. The lead investigator leaned forward and asked a direct question. "Why were you near Nancy Gray's house at 2:14 in the morning?" For a moment, he didn't answer. Then he shook his head. He insisted the phone data must be wrong. But the agents had one more piece of evidence. And according to leaked reports, this was the moment everything changed. The investigator pulled out a photograph. A grainy security camera still. The image wasn't perfectly clear, but one detail stood out immediately. A vehicle parked near Nancy Gray Street, the same make and color as the car registered to her son-in-law. When the photo was placed on the table, witnesses say the man stared at it for several seconds without speaking. The room felt heavier. The tension grew unbearable, because suddenly, the timeline he had been repeating for days no longer made sense. Outside the building, reporters were already gathering. Cameras were being set up. Everyone sensed that the investigation had reached a breaking point. Inside the interrogation room, the silence stretched longer and longer. Then, according to sources, Nancy Gray's son-in-law finally spoke again. But this time, his voice sounded completely different. Quieter, shakier, and the words he said next stunned investigators. Because instead of continuing to deny everything, he leaned forward slowly and whispered something no one expected to hear. "Okay, I went there that night." The agents immediately asked the next question. "Why?" He looked down at the table, his hands trembling, and after a long pause, he said something that turned the entire investigation upside down. He claimed Nancy Gray had asked him to come. But if that statement is true, then it raises a terrifying new possibility. Because it means Nancy didn't vanish because of a stranger. She may have opened the door willingly. And if that happened, then the mystery surrounding her disappearance might be far more personal and far more dangerous than anyone originally believed. But what investigators discovered next would make the entire situation even more disturbing, because the evidence suggested Nancy Gray wasn't the only person hiding secrets that night. The moment Nancy Gray's son-in-law admitted he had gone to her house that night, the entire investigation took a direction no one had predicted. Until that moment, the case had been treated like a possible abduction. But now investigators were asking a much darker question. What exactly happened after Nancy opened the door inside the interrogation room? Agents immediately began pressing for details. Why had Nancy asked him to come over at such a strange hour? What was so urgent that it couldn't wait until morning? For several minutes, the room filled with silence again. Then he finally answered. According to leaked sources, he claimed Nancy had discovered something related to money, a financial transaction, a large one that, according to him, had created tension within the family. But the moment that explanation leaked, the internet exploded. Within hours, screenshots from anonymous accounts began circulating online. One post quickly went viral. At Investigate Now, Leaked financial records show a massive transfer linked to the Gray family business just days before Nancy vanished. If this is real, this story just became a financial scandal. The hashtag Gray Family Secrets started trending across multiple platforms. Thousands of people began analyzing every detail of the case. Some believed the son-in-law was finally telling the truth. Others believed he was desperately trying to protect himself. And then another unexpected twist hit the internet. A well-known media personality suddenly posted a cryptic message that sent shockwaves through the online community. At Media Insider Live, people focusing on the son-in-law might be missing the bigger picture. If the leaked documents are real, more than one person in that family had a reason to panic. That single post triggered a wave of speculation. News channels began debating the case live on air. Panels of commentators argued over the evidence. And suddenly, the narrative that had been forming around Nancy's son-in-law started to shift, because investigators were reportedly looking at something even more disturbing. According to a source familiar with the investigation, the financial records Nancy had discovered weren't just unusual. They were hidden, carefully hidden, and the transactions appeared to involve accounts that no one outside a very small circle should have known about. Then came the detail that stunned even experienced reporters. One of those accounts had been accessed just hours before Nancy disappeared, but not by her son-in-law, by someone else entirely. When that information began circulating online, the reaction was immediate. At Crime Forum Daily, wait, if someone else accessed the account that night, then who else knew what Nancy discovered? Suddenly, the case wasn't just about one suspect anymore. It was about a secret that may have involved multiple people inside Nancy Gray's inner circle. Back inside the interrogation room, investigators were already confronting the son-in-law with this new information. Sources say the moment he heard it, his reaction was immediate. Shock. Real shock. Because if the records are accurate, then someone else was moving money the very same night Nancy vanished. Someone who may have realized she was about to expose everything. And if that's true, it raises a terrifying possibility. Nancy Gray may not have been the only person hiding something. But the biggest question still remains unanswered. Who else knew what she had discovered? And what were they willing to do to keep it buried?